Hello and welcome. I'm Jeff Claridge. I'm a clarinetist, saxophonist, flautist, composer, arranger, educator in Vancouver, BC, Canada. I'm here to talk about the jazz clarinet. This is kind of my jazz clarinet agenda. So, here is a mini-series. It's geared specifically towards younger students who have started the clarinet but don't really know how it fits into jazz. The clarinet is one of the first jazz instruments. It is still like a main jazz instrument as far as I'm concerned. The problem is, when you go to a jam session, when you play like typical modern jazz, um, there's like a kind of a language and a style that most people play, like that most people learn to begin with. In terms of big band writing, which you might find at high school, it's kind of the Count Basie orchestra. I'm dumbing this down just a little bit. In modern jazz, in terms of like going to a jam session and playing a song like On Green Dolphin Street, you're basically going towards the Miles Davis Quintet, the first Miles Davis Quintet. And they didn't have a clarinet player. The entire 1950s, or like basically Miles Davis' entire career, outside of Gil Evans, did not involve a clarinet player. Basically, everyone you're going to hear and like playing in that general style, not everyone, but basically, is not going to be a clarinet player. You're going to run into people who have no idea how to play with a clarinet player, are not going to care about it. And especially if you're a teenager, you're going to run across music teachers who have no idea where to put you. And it's not necessarily their fault. They're dealing with big band arrangements that may have a clarinet feature for a saxophone doubling on clarinet, and that's it. And it's hard for them to find charts that necessarily have an extra clarinet part. I've never been in a band that's had just an extra clarinet part. I always wanted to, and it didn't happen. Unless you make it yourself, of course. So, here is a resource. It can go for basically three demographics. There's people who are starting the clarinet and want to know how does the clarinet fit into jazz, into modern jazz, playing typical chord changes with a typical language from kind of Charlie Parker and bebop, 1945, through to the early 60s. That kind of language. But I also want this to be a resource for jazz fans who may not really know what the clarinet history is in that time period. There's some amazing players. I'm going to run through just a few of them who I think will inspire you. And also, there's a big difference between the clarinet and the saxophone in terms of going to a jam session. And the biggest difference I can say is, because I'm on both sides. I play saxophone and I play clarinet. I've gone to the same jam sessions. I've gone to as many jam sessions as I can. I have shown up to basically the same musicians, and I brought a saxophone, tenor or alto, and the bands respond to me in a certain way. They've treated me a certain way, but the way that they play, when I play a certain thing, they respond in a certain way. And then I've done the same thing on clarinet. Almost every musician I've played with, the way that they respond to the clarinet is just worse. It's less interested, it's less focused. Not everyone. There's definitely exceptions, but I would say as a general like stereotype, that's there. So part of the reason can be people's biases and all of that. But I think the biggest part is if I play, something that sounds a bit like Coltrane, the piano player probably knows to play a little bit like McCoy Tyner. You don't have to. You can always change that up. But if you do, you're continuing the language. You're following my language. I'm quoting something where I'm playing with a certain accent, and then the piano player is kind of following that. I see what you're doing. They're not copying the same material back, but you're carrying a conversation on like a different nuance. If I play a little bit like Tony Scott, there's not a single piano player I've ever played with who knows like Bill Evans. I'm going to play like Bill Evans. It just doesn't happen. They don't quite hear it, they don't quite see it, and I don't blame them. So, here's a small, limited resource that I'm going to try to get out there. I've recorded this many times, and I still am not satisfied with it. I hope this is the last time I'm doing this. I'm going to go over 6 musicians who I think are the most inspiring, most innovative, starting with Benny Goodman, um, who I think he's not the first jazz clarinetist, but he's one of those musicians who studied the playing styles of basically everyone who came before him, like Jimmy Noon, Johnny Dodds, Frank Teschemacher, and could play it in like who could reference it, who could play all of that material, and then took it forward. He added his own thing to music. So that's where I'm starting. That's kind of my New Testament, let's say. Um, and then 5 other musicians who I think innovated in a similar way, who brought something to jazz no one else had done before, and who other musicians, other clarinet players at least, heard and tried to play like. These are the 6 people I think you should check out, or at least know the names of. I'm not saying that every clarinetist in the world needs to be able to play exactly like them. Like, as a saxophonist, you never need to play like John Coltrane. There are so many other people who like to play like John Coltrane. It's probably better that you don't try to play it. But at the same time, you learn so much from trying to play that way. If it inspires you, go for it. At least, a little bit. It adds something to the character of you playing. So, 6 musicians. I'm going to cover them. Hopefully I'll cover more, but I want this to be limited, especially for younger kids who don't have that much attention span. And I'm going to make this as simple and as short as possible. So, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, Buddy DeFranco, Tony Scott, Eddie Daniels, and Paquito de Rivera. Welcome, and hopefully about once a week I think I'm going to be releasing these, and I'll go over each one. I'll give you a few playing examples of what I think you should listen for, and it's not necessarily a specific thing in terms of the clarinet technique or anything. It's what I think inspires me and might inspire you. So thank you very much. See you soon.